and
The Fly Route Pod. The Fly Route Pod.
Welcome to the final segment of our show, the heart of our show, Ballers Bouquets. Too often in the media, people only want to focus on the negative and salacious things athletes do and never want to give them their credit where credit is due. Here, we like to make a change.
Right. So for this week's Ballers Bouquet, we're gonna stay close to home. So as we've all let you know over the past episodes, we live and record this podcast in Dallas, Texas. Texas was hit hard, as well as most of the middle of the U.S., by a polar vortex that had temperatures in most of the U.S. at least 20 and up to 40 degrees lower than they are normally. And I want all of our viewers, even those who may live in different countries or parts of our country in the north, to understand that we're not built for this. Things in our area are just not made for this kind of cold and snow and ice.
Nothing is winterized.
Nothing is winterized.
There's no infrastructure.
Not for this. Not for 6 degrees.
There's no plows. There's no salt trucks.
We put out sand, not salt.
And that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I digress. But Texas is hard hit last week by a snowstorm from about Sunday to Saturday, essentially. We were stuck at home. So Valentine's Day all the way to Saturday, when we finally got up well over freezing and things started to thaw out. But basically, between that time period, it was cold. The cold caused lots of problems because our power plants weren't winterized or weatherized or whatever word you want to put in there. So they literally shut down things like the gauges on natural gas lines freezing, etc. And so people didn't have power. So the agency that runs Texas Power Plant put us on quote unquote rolling blackouts. They were not rolling for most of us. We didn't know when we would lose power or get it back. Typically you would not have power for, let's say, 4, 5, 6 hours, and then you'd get it back for like an hour and a half. And at least for us in this area, some people just didn't have power for 3, 4, 5 days at a time. And our homes are not insulated for the cold. So when that happens, number one, people inside get cold. Your pipes freeze.
And burst.
And will eventually burst. And when that melts, your entire space is ruined. People were not able to cook hot meals, take showers, have clean drinking water, because many of our cities had to issue boil warnings, and or there was no water at all for people to even get out of the faucet. So it was really, really hard, really rough. We're not built for this. People made fun of Texans a lot on social media. And I think that's a little ridiculous.
That hurt you?
Because, I'm not going to say it's hurt. I'm going to say that it's inaccurate. And if it were flipped, we'd be called rude. Because if we made fun of people in Boston for complaining about 85-degree weather, they'd be like, oh, you don't understand. We're not built for this. We don't have air conditioners. And it's the same exact argument, but in reverse. For us, we're not prepared for these kind of winters. Texas usually has mild winters. We maybe have a few days that are actually below freezing, but not very many. And so to have weather that is in the single digits or below zero at night and have pipes burst and no power we're not built for that.
People don't have air conditioners in Boston?
No. In a lot of northern cities, especially on the East Coast, older cities, they don't have, like Philadelphia, Boston, a lot of places in New York, they don't have central air conditioning. At most, some places have window units. And so when the temperature gets above 85, 90, 100, those are not good enough to keep up with cooling people down enough not to have like heat strokes. So, yes, real thing. Northerners don't do heat. Southerners don't do cold. We do what we do.
I'm lucky to be from the Midwest.
Right,
we're
do
just
both.
Prepared.
You just do both.
Who would have thought?
That little backstory is important to kind of establish the situation, the both severity and the magnitude of what's going on in Texas and what's still happening. People are still recovering. I know, for example, part of my family still doesn't have water at all. In this case, it's not because of the city, but because there are so many burst pipes in their apartment community that they just have not been able to get the parts and plumbers to fix. They can't turn their water on yet. And so people all over Texas still need to go to food banks to get food, water stations, all kinds of things to do their basic necessities. And so for this week's Ballers Bouquet, we're going to start this week and over the next few weeks pointing out and calling out and giving praise to players who are in the NFL and NBA who dedicated their time, money, and resources to helping the people of Texas recover from this emergency, this winter weather crisis. And we're going to start this week in Houston, H-Town, largest city in Texas. And we're going to start with two players who helped provide over 13,000 meals and thousands of bottles of water to Houstonians. And this week's Ballers Bouquet is going to be shared between both James Harden and Pierre Desir. So I think it's important to point out the difference between these two players. So many of us are familiar with James Harden. He spent the better part of the last 9 NBA seasons as the star player for the Houston Rockets. He frequents some nighttime establishments in Houston quite frequently and is very generous with his money. Always has been. I'm making fun of him, but really James is a great guy from everything that I've been able to find both this week and in the past about his efforts to help the city of Houston. James, as we know, if you keep up with the game, got traded to the Brooklyn Nets the start of this season and has been playing there for a while and playing quite well, actually. But James feels that Houston is home. He spent so much time there, got to know the people there, etc. And he posted on his Instagram essentially a quote that said, you know, the people of Houston were good to me. I've been on the phones all day trying to help in any way that I can because that place is home to me. And so that is James. That's one player. We know him, real popular, familiar, etc. The connection is clear. But then we have this other player who's helping Houston with food, water, etc. Pierre Desir. You know who this guy is?
No idea.
Never heard of him. But he's a great guy. He's an NFL player. He's 30 years old. He's a cornerback. He's 7 years in the league. He's currently a free agent, so he's not even on a team right now. And he donated 10,000 meals to the Houston Food Bank. And you're like, okay, that's interesting. Who is this guy, though? So Pierre has absolutely no connection to Houston whatsoever. No family there, didn't play there, didn't grow up there, nothing. He literally saw a crisis happening and just said, I felt like it was the right thing to do. Period. And so for him, there is no connection. But I wanted to do both of these players together to draw the kind of contrast that you can give back to people who you both know and in your neighborhood and your city and you share common things with, and people who are total strangers. And sometimes people end up just getting more help. And so for this, you know, James himself donated, I believe it was 3,000 meals through his restaurant in Houston, his newly opened restaurant called 13. And he was helped by, I believe the group is called
The Relief Gang.
The Relief Gang, which is an organization founded by Trey the Truth and I believe it's DJ Mr. Rogers. And I was interesting. I did not know that Trey the Truth had a foundation in Houston, which is surprising. If you listen to rap, you listen to Houston rap in particular, you know who that is. But kind of surprising that not only that he has a charity, but that he teamed up with James Harden through James's restaurant. They donated 3,000 meals. They had essentially a call out on James's Instagram where they would either deliver the meals or people can come pick them up. And that was, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday, the kind of beginning/middle of the snowpocalypse crisis.
That was like the first couple of days where people had like no power. Like
right.
It started on like Sunday night. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's not the only thing James did for this crisis. So Thursday, James put out a call on his, I believe, Instagram story for a water station that he was hosting for people to come pick up bottled water. Like I said, people still don't have drinking water, bath water, any of that. So he also put out a call to donate bottled water. I'm not sure exactly how many were donated, but I know it was open for several hours. So I have to imagine there were hundreds of people who were helped and aided by James's efforts on this. So huge shout out to both James and Pierre for their generosity for the city of Houston and for our fellow Texans. But I want to shine some more praise on these guys to really illustrate how good they are. So Pierre is a 2-time nominee for the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. He previously was nominated, I believe, for donating over $150,000 to a local organization while he played in Indianapolis. James Harden himself has given several times in the past. He helped I believe, give over $1 million during Hurricane Harvey relief. In 2017, James donated, I believe, $250,000 to have basketball courts in Houston restored, etc. And so these guys, and those are not the only things they've done, not at all whatsoever. Those are just two examples. And so these guys are doing amazing, excellent work. Want to give them a huge shout out. For those at home, our listeners, and especially those who either in Texas who weren't impacted or in other parts of our country who are able to help, please reach out and help. You can donate to all the local food banks in the major cities. So the Houston Food Bank, Dallas Food Bank, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, etc. You can donate to organizations like the Red Cross, who are helping provide emergency relief for families right now in Texas. And if you need other ideas, or for some reason you want other organizations that are a little bit more targeted, we're going to be sharing out tweets once this drops every couple of hours with a different organization you can donate to help the Texas recovery effort after our dangerous, hellacious, deadly winter storms where over 36 people died, some of them basically freezing to death in their homes because of the lack of power. And so this is a huge emergency that happened. Lots of other people are doing things. We saw AOC raise over $5 million for Texas. Former senatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke helped have a phone bank to call elderly to get them to warming stations, etc. So lots of people are pouring out help, but I can tell you there are lots of people in Texas who are still hurting and who need help. And so all the more help is going to be needed. And that's this week's Ballers Bouquet. And so we hope you enjoyed that. If you want to give, please look out for those tweets. Remember to follow us at the Fly Route Pod on Twitter.